5 Live Formula One.
And welcome to Monza, just a few kilometres outside Milan. And I have to say, after last weekend's Dutch downpours during the Dutch Grand Prix, it's rather a relief to be standing in the pit lane here in Monza in bright conditions, sunshine and clouds. It's warm, it's 25 degrees, and we're getting ready for the first practice session of the weekend. And I'm standing outside the Ferrari garage. Of course, we're racing on Ferrari's home soil this weekend. Last weekend it was Max Verstappen territory, but this weekend it's all about the team in red, Scuderia Ferrari. And I've just seen Charles Leclerc head out to the pit wall to wave to the fans who are already in the grandstands around this incredible and historic circuit, the Temple of Speed. But of course, we might be racing on Ferrari's home soil, but the attention is always this year on Max Verstappen, the two-time world champion, current championship leader. He's got a huge margin in the driver's standings, a 138-point lead over his teammate Checo Perez, having extended that lead by 13 points last time out. And it's looking likely that he'll take his third drivers' championship this month or early next. But it's not just all about Max and Ferrari. There were more headlines yesterday as well. Mercedes slightly stealing the thunder of Ferrari as we arrived in Italy, announcing that George Russell and Sir Lewis Hamilton will be with the team until the end of 2025. Finally giving us the news that we've been waiting for over the last few months. Lewis Hamilton will be still in Formula One next year and the year after that, and it will be with Mercedes alongside George Russell. So plenty for us to discuss over the course of the next 60 minutes as we get the first practice session underway. I'm down here in the pit lane in the commentary box. It's our lead commentator Harry Benjamin and former F1 driver Jolyon Palmer. Guys, it's lovely for me to be dry down here in the pit lane, I have to say, but it's not just a contrast of weather that we've got this weekend, it's a different type of circuit, isn't it, Harry? This place is all about speed, and it wasn't quite like that last weekend. So what are you expecting from this, the next few days at least?
Well, I mean, I was expecting a Max Verstappen walkover in Zandvoort, and although that was eventually what happened, it wasn't quite the case to begin with. So who knows what will happen this weekend? But as you say, with the weather, it might be a little bit more straightforward. It's a low downforce track, a power-sensitive circuit, so the grunts in your power unit in the back of your Formula One car is what you need to power you down the straight. So, I mean, I think about Williams, actually, who have been known all year long for their straight-line speed. They had the pace in Zandvoort. That's not known for its straight-line speed, but here it absolutely is. So I would expect the Williams to be going strong and hopefully having another good weekend here further down the grid.
Yeah, definitely ones to look out for, the Williams team. But in terms of a real threat to Red Bull and Max Verstappen this weekend, Jolyon, Mercedes slightly talking themselves out of it. George Russell thinking, that they won't be quite as close as they were in Zandvoort. Of course, the missed opportunities last weekend for the British team. But are all eyes actually on Ferrari, not just because we're racing on home soil, but because they could be the ones with the better performance this weekend?
You'd hope they've got better performance than they've had recently, certainly from last week, where it was a particularly tricky weekend for both Ferraris, and of course Leclerc not getting any points at all, Sainz drifting away from a potential podium. And this is Ferrari's home race, so all eyes are on them regardless of whether they're going to be better or not. So can they cope with that pressure as well? Who can take the fight to Red Bull? Can anyone take the fight to Red Bull? I don't think anyone's realistically turns up to this weekend thinking they can beat Max, but you've got to be the next quickest behind him and then hope he runs into trouble, especially on a circuit like this where you talk about who's favourites, who's not, what does this track suit. You know what? It kind of suits Red Bull.
Oh, well, there we go. That's ruined the next few days as a few cars head down to the end of the pit lane now, waiting for the red light to turn green. We're waiting outside the Ferrari garage. There's some tarpaulin over the back of Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Of course, the team's bringing some circuit-specific low downforce upgrades this weekend to help with all those challenges that Harry mentioned earlier on. And I've just seen that they're going to spray the rear of Charles' car with some Floviz, that highlighter colour paint, just to have a little look at how their rear wing for this weekend, and of course their front wing as well, they've changed that too, how that performs, how the air flows over the car, all in the hope that they'll reduce their drag. Right, I'm just being ushered out of the way from the Ferrari garage because I think they're going to be heading out, and I'm sure, like we saw last weekend when Max headed out each time, the crowd will get on their feet. They are here to see the team in red, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Of course, Charles winning here back in 2019 and was on pole position that year, and of course last year a P2 for him. Carlos Sainz just missing out on the podium last year, P4 for him, but they are going to want to do everything they can to be on that podium this weekend. Guys are going to throw it up to you in the commentary box. Let's get FP1 underway.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. We are indeed underway. Green light on at the end of the pit lane. Lando Norris and Felipe Drugovich in the Aston Martin replaces Lance Stroll for this free practice 1 session, the 2022 Formula 2 champion. And for those who wish to do a sync up, it's 59 minutes and 16 seconds remain of this FP1 session. So Drugovich then keen to get the mileage under his belt, and this is all part of the new rules that were brought in last couple of seasons of Formula 1, deciding that all teams have to run 2 rookies in an FP1 session this year. So Felipe Drugovich gets his outing in that Aston Martin. Lando Norris in the papaya orange McLaren headed out there with a huge amount of measuring devices attached to that car as well. McLaren running a lot of upgrades, front wing, the front corner, a rear wing end plate, and some bits to the rear corner as well of that McLaren. So lots of upgrades up and down the field as Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc on home soil for Ferrari make their way out. And it's even more pressure for Carlos Sainz because he turns 29 today. So happy birthday to Carlos Sainz.
Does that add the pressure? Having a birthday on a Friday of a Grand Prix weekend? That's nice. Celebrate it by driving an iconic circuit on the Formula 1 calendar. And he's straight out there on circuit with most of the field joining him. Just Williams and Alfa Romeo staying in the garage for now. It's all about low downforce. This one, the Ferrari rear wing is looking super skinny. You want to trim out the cars as much as you can because it's long straights and mainly chicanes. There's the first chicane, the second chicane, 2 Lesmo corners, right-handers, medium to high speed now as well, especially the first one's slightly cambered, the second one, the gravel can catch you out a bit on the exit. Then there's another blast up to Ascari corner, which is another chicane, but it's a much quicker one left, and then try and keep it pinned through the right and the left. Another straight up to Parabolica, which is hairy on these low downforce configurations, and then you're through. So it's so much about trimming out the car, and that's why we've got a lot of aero rakes on the cars already as well now, just to try and measure what's going on a downforce setting that not many have run yet this year. And then you've got to survive it through the corners. It's a fun circuit, this one. It
is a fun circuit. It's a driver's favourite, isn't it? But something to add to the mix as well, in terms of the tyres. We have the alternate tyre allocation out in force again, as we're just seeing images of Charles Leclerc on his outlap, waving to the fans as well in a tweaked livery for the Ferrari with added yellow and stripes across the nose cone and the engine cover, which celebrates their Le Mans 24-hour race victory in the Hypercar Sports Car Championship early this year with their reserve driver and the man who was part of that team at Le Mans, Antonio Giovinazzi, here this weekend as well, watching on from the pit wall. But we have the alternate tyre allocation. Last saw that in Hungary. That was the first time it made its debut, and this is an effort to trial out reducing the number of tyres brought to the weekend by Pirelli in a sustainability effort, but also to try and see if we can spice things up a bit, I think. So instead of 13 sets, it's just 11 per team, and it also affects, Jolene, how we go qualifying, because you have to use in Q1 the hards, in Q2 the medium, and in Q3 the softs. But it was quite tasty in Hungary. It spiced up the grid.
I quite liked it, yeah, I enjoyed it. Lewis Hamilton was on pole that day. George Russell struggled a little bit more in qualifying in Hungary. We had a Ferrari out in Q2. We had a really thrilling end to Q3 as well, with Hamilton, Verstappen and Norris all gunning for pole position, which Hamilton took. It was quite unpredictable, and that's what I like about it. Leclerc, who you can hear now, on the hard tyres in the Ferrari on an opening lap, is trying to dial this in. You've got Ocon out there on a soft tyre, you've got a few drivers out there on a medium, including Lando Norris, and there's a lot more to explore when it's a little bit like this. You've got to stay on top of your game the whole time, learning on each and every tyre, rather than just relax and think that the hard and the mediums are your race tyres and qualifying's all about soft. It's not the case here, and it is, I mean, there's a sustainability side to it as well. You reduce some tyres coming to the race weekends, but it can spice up the action, as we saw. So I'm looking forward to seeing it in action once again.
Well, let's wait and see how that plays out. A couple of the drivers not so keen on it, as you alluded to there, with having to manage your tyres throughout the weekend, essentially. But first lap times coming through on the board for FP1, and it is currently at the top, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren with a 1:24.2 on the soft compounder tyre. Then comes Lewis Hamilton on the hard compounder tyre, 1:24.4, and that was some of the major news coming into this weekend, Jolyon, wasn't it? Hamilton and Russell both getting contract extensions through to 2025. And now I was listening to the Checkered Flag podcast, the preview show that you were on, Joe, and you were saying, actually it's a bit disappointing, really, because it might have been quite fun to have seen him have end his career with a Ferrari or try something new, because really this means the driver market is going to be a little bit stale over the next couple of seasons.
It is stale, the driver market, but I mean, when I say disappointing, that's from a fan's point of view. So from my own selfish point of view, I wanted to see Hamilton switch it up and go to Ferrari and try and see what he can do there. But of course, the logical point of view is stay with Mercedes. I'm sure that they have a better chance of winning in the next couple of years, especially the trajectory that we've seen even in the last 12 months. So, the logic's there, and I think it was a matter of time before that deal was announced anyway, or done and then announced between Hamilton and Mercedes. Russell as well was done a while ago, and they announced them together. It's a good pairing.
Oh, I have a problem. I don't know how I get going, because every time I pull the clutch, it goes into anti-stall.
So that's Zhou Guanyu on the radio there, and he is currently being wheeled back up the pit lane to his Alfa Romeo garage. And Alfa Romeo running a new livery this weekend with the Italian flag adorning the engine cover on that Alfa Romeo to celebrate their home race and the launch of a new Alfa Romeo car that they've been showing off this weekend. Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, still in the pit lane. Okay, yeah, the writing on the wall for Hamilton. He was obviously going to re-sign eventually. But what was the last big driver move that got you excited then, in terms of from a fan perspective, as we see Valtteri Bottas emerging from the pit lane and also stuttering with his Alfa Romeo? Here he is.
Getting anti-stall immediately. Okay, copy.
So both Alfas in trouble at the start of FP1.
Yeah, they've got some drivability issues. So it's either very tricky clutch, or as Valtteri was just shaking his head there in the cockpit as he came to a standstill. They're both still in the garage. I wonder if it's something on the power unit side where the revs are just dropping, and it's either a clutch thing or it's something more serious. And neither Alfa Romeo has actually managed to get out of the pits, and they've both tried. So that's quite a concern, and it's surprising given where we're at in the season now as well.
Yeah, not happy days down at Alfa Romeo, so we'll keep you up to date with how they're going on for the rest of this session. A driver move that last got you excited, Jolyon, I want to know. And I think you can have up and down the pit lane, because I know in the podcast where you were like, midfield doesn't really count, that moves all the time.
Midfield moves, they're nice to see. I'm excited by the man we're listening to now. Oscar Piastri goes to the top of the time, so that's nice to see him, and the way that the deal was done with Piastri going to McLaren, well, that was exciting in itself, wasn't it? But I find that with the midfield teams, it's nice to see change. Fernando Alonso was Andrew Benson's recommendation for something that got him very excited last season, moving to Aston Martin. But again, that was going from a midfielder to a midfielder who, as fate would have it, turns into a front runner, and it's great to see. In answer to your question, maybe George Russell going to Mercedes. Yeah. When swapping Bottas for Russell, I think was very exciting. Start of last year. It's good to see Perez in the Red Bull as well. When you see top teams mixing up the driver lineup, giving someone else a chance to win Grand Prix, it's always fun. I'd say the last one genuinely would be probably Russell in alongside Hamilton at Mercedes.
Yeah.
What about you?
It's got to be Palmer to Renault, surely. 2016?
Yeah, that was definitely a big one.
Big shake-up on the grid. Let us know, what's your most exciting driver move, or what's got you so excited in terms of the driver market over the last few years? Hashtag BBCF1. Okay, 50 minutes and 43 seconds remain of FP1. Oscar Piastri has regained the top spot just ahead of Verstappen and Perez. Hamilton, Leclerc, the top five, as Carlos Sainz, the birthday boy, slams on the brakes and into turns 1 and 2. The Rettifilo chicane, one of the biggest braking zones of the year, and then gets puts on the power and heads round the right-hander of turn 3 as the sun glistens down on that Ferrari with the tweaked livery and the yellow glints and stripes added in across the front nose cone and the engine cover, and he's found a little bit of time in sector 1 as he brakes for the De La Roja chicane, turns 4 and 5, before you then head into the double right-handers of the Lesmos, and keeping it nice and tidy is Carlos Sainz. He's on the hard compound of tyre, and a reminder, we are running the alternate tyre allocation this weekend, so everybody gets a little bit less. Rather than 13 sets of tyres, you get 11, so 3 hards, 4 mediums and 4 softs, and this is the sound of Carlos Sainz as he comes into the left-hander of Ascari, keeps his foot planted. They've actually removed some of the speed bumps on those corners as well, which I know, and we've witnessed over the past years, have really can cause some damage across the years they've been used. I think they've been removed the Ascari chicane, Rettifilo and De La Roja, so we won't see as prominent sausage curbs as we're used to as Carlos Sainz crosses the line to find 2/10 over Oscar Piastri to the top of the timings.
You're missing Alex Peroni in a GP3 race going over sausage curbs at this circuit out of Parabolica, and he launched into the air. That's the danger of sausage curbs, especially when you're attacking them at speed. They do have the propensity to create some sort of airborne shunt. So they've gone, and we'll give a little bit more forgiveness to some of the drivers. And I think track limits is going to be something we're going to keep an eye out for, particularly the exit of Parabolica through the weekend. You get away with it on a Friday, but into qualifying, we've seen it a few times this year, occasionally chaotically, like in Austria, where track limits rules the weekend. So far, it doesn't seem to be an issue, but I wonder if Parabolica, you're still able to just nudge all 4 wheels over the white line.
It's Verstappen and Perez, currently 1 and 2. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren as he comes in to the Parabolica, although actually it was renamed a couple of years ago to the Alboreto Curve. So I don't know what we call it now, because technically it is the Alboreto Curve as McLaren of Piastri comes across the line. Overall, fastest in the first sector, losing time in the final 2 sectors, so stays 6th fastest for the time being as he gets up to 8th gear and then downshifts into turn 1 with a little bit of traffic in front of him as well. How is Felipe Drugovich getting on, our rookie, in his first FP1 session of the year? And he is currently down in 14th, but he's been around, how many laps? He's done a few laps already, but not set a meaningful lap time as of yet. So he's done 4 laps at the moment, and he's on the medium compounded tyre.
Yeah, hasn't done a flying lap at all, but he's on one now. Coming out at the first chicane, arcing right, flat out through Curva Grande. Section of track that's high speed and always feels a lot more narrow than you'd expect it to. Opens up then into the De La Roja second chicane. Through goes Felipe Drugovich, right up to the gravel on the outside of the second chicane, into the Lesmos. A couple of right-handers carry the speed through the first apex, pick it up. Second apex greets you straight away. And through he goes again, stamp on the gas. He'll go around Pierre Gasly on a slow lap. It's a very mixed up order so far. Well, not order, but run plan. 2 Red Bulls followed by Sainz, Hamilton and Leclerc is pretty much run-of-the-mill order, but we still haven't seen anything from the Williams cars, from the Alfa Romeos. The Aston Martins both on a flying lap right now. Fernando Alonso just behind Felipe Drugovich, who weaves through a McLaren and a Red Bull on the run down to Curva di Alboreto.
Thank you.
The Parabolica. Still that Parabolica, surely.
Yeah, but I'm a stickler for the rules, Jolyon. Come on. Parabolica, Alboreto Curve, we'll alternate it up. As Drugovich crosses the line and sets the 13th fastest time, just behind Liam Lawson, who improves his lap time in that Alpha Tauri and is currently 12th. How impressed were you with Liam Lawson last time out in Zandvoort, being chucked in literally halfway through? Didn't get any dry running till literally race day, and even that wasn't fully dry. Now he actually gets a bit of a run-up this weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what Lawson can do now. It's an interesting question. How impressed were you with him in Zandvoort? Because he made it round, and that was the good thing, just making it round.
The bar was low.
The bar was low, but it was such tricky conditions. The first time he sat in this AlphaTauri car on slick tyres was lining up on the grid or going to the grid. That's the first time he felt the car on slicks. So to have that and be thrust into a Grand Prix straight away, and then it rains on the opening lap and you're straight back to the Inters, it couldn't have been a much harder scenario for him to step in for Daniel Ricciardo, who we still don't know when he's going to be back, but I would say probably after Singapore is his best chance. I can't see Daniel coming back for Singapore. So Lawson's got a few races and a fresh start this weekend on what is a much simpler circuit as well than Zandvoort. This is going to be a really interesting one, and he's one of those drivers that needs to stake a claim for a regular place on the grid for next year. People have been talking about Lawson for a while. Former F2 frontrunner last year, racing in Japan this season.
Yeah, doing good stuff in that Japanese Super Formula Championship at the moment. He's currently second in that championship with a couple of wins to his name as well. So,
you excited by Lawson?
Yes and no. I think my gut actually says I'm not that excited, but I'm more excited about him than I am Ricciardo, to be honest, because in my opinion, Daniel Ricciardo kind of had... He's a fan favourite, it's brilliant to see him back, but I feel like he kind of had his time, and I would rather see Red Bull take a punt on one of their many young drivers in the form of a Liam Lawson or Ayumu Iwasa, who's next up in Formula 2, arguably. You've got Jack Crawford, a young American driver in Formula 2 as well, Dennis Hauger. So they've got all this talent. You've got to give them a try. So, you know, I think Lawson needs a little bit more time, obviously, to see what he's got. So, you know, everything, it's now time for him to make that claim, as you say, and see what he's got.
It's interesting because it's tough on Ricciardo, who obviously got the call back, missed his F1 racing first half of the year, got the call back, and that was all with a view to replacing Perez at Red Bull, the Ricciardo signing. Whereas Lawson, that'd be a call for the long term, whereas Ricciardo's the short term call for Red Bull. But picking up that injury, it just delays the short term, which is not really what a 34-year-old Daniel Ricciardo really needs. So he could have done with being out here, pumping in some eye-catching results, and starting to get the ball rolling for that second Red Bull seat, which, let's not beat about the bush, that's his aim, and that's why he's back. But whilst he's out, Lawson has got the chance to show what he can do, and maybe Red Bull switch their plan in the longer run. Anytime you're in a Formula 1 car, you can show what you're capable of and get on the grid, even if it's not at AlphaTauri next year for Red Bull, as Nick de Vries did last season at this point.
Exactly. Well, this is the bonus that Red Bull have, isn't it? They have so many young drivers that they can call on and swap in and out, so they can lean on their young driver program, no matter how brutal you think it may or may not be. Lawson currently 14th, and Tsunoda, his teammate, in 15th. AlphaTauri bringing a lot of upgrades this weekend. Still not out on track, though. The two Williamses and the two Alfa Romeos both finding issues getting out of the pit lane. Rosanna, do we know any more?
Yeah, you're right. The Alfa Romeo is still sitting in the garage. They had a warning message, so they brought the cars back in for a precautionary check. So a little bit of waiting going on for those two. Joe 19th, Bottas 20th, both drivers yet to set a time. And then I've just been up at the McLaren garage because Lando Norris has just headed back out. Another driver yet to set a time, although I'm sure that will appear on the timing screens soon. But Lando was running the aero rake on the car at the front of the car. McLaren have brought so many changes to the car this weekend, as we've spoken about, circuit-specific changes. They've got front wing, front corner, rear wing end plate, rear wing, rear corner. So he was out there with the aero rake on to start with. He's come in, he's got rid of that bit of furniture, and now he's going to be out on track. And as I say that, he jumps up to P9 on the soft tyre. His teammate, Oscar Piastri, just having a little bit of work done by the mechanics around the suspension at the front. And they, I'm sure, will be sending him out very shortly as well. Potentially a contender this weekend, the McLarens. We know how it went a few years ago, don't we?
We certainly do. Well, thank you, Rosanna. But as we're just seeing images of the Alfa Romeo Valtteri Bottas sitting empty, they're not the best of starts to their FP1 session, and neither Williams is out either. Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Sainz and Hamilton, the top five as it currently stands.
I wonder if part of this waiting game in this session is because of this tyre allocation. So there is a set fewer tyres to run in practice, and this is what we didn't see in Hungary because it was a rain-affected weekend, so they jumped on the Inters, and I think Williams maybe just playing the waiting game. A lot of the front runners as well are back in the pits and waiting. Just 9 laps for Max Verstappen on a set of hards. Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Sainz, Hamilton and Piastri, the top 6, all waiting in the pits. It's a relatively low degradation circuit as well. You can rack up the laps, but no one has done too much just yet. 11 laps for Liam Lawson, who's just crossed the line, is the most of anyone.
Hashtag BBC F1, your driver moves that have caused you the most excitement throughout the years. This off the back of Lewis Hamilton re-signing with Mercedes, which has kind of led to a bit of a stale driver market. Who was your pick again? I can't remember. Who did you say?
Okay, you asked me a different question.
Did I?
You asked me what's the most recent exciting move.
I
went with George Russell.
Recent?
You
I don't
chucked
think I said
recency in for
I'm
me.
not sure about that.
You're changing the goalposts, but...
Because hashtag BBC F1, we're going back a bit here. So Mako says, I think Senna to Williams was probably quite huge at the time.
Momentous.
Damon Hill to Footwork.
Yeah.
Niche. It's niche.
Who tweeted that in?
That was Mako on hashtag BBC F1. Jamie has said the most exciting ones are the ones that blindside you. So I'm thinking Vettel and Ricciardo leaving Red Bull. Rosberg's shock retirement. Okay, that's a good one. Hamilton to Merck, obviously, among others. The Racing Armchair has also said Russell to Mercedes. R has said Alonso to McLaren. I'm presuming the second time around.
The first time was a lot more shocking when he was world champion with Renault and he's announced to move to McLaren. 2006 to 2007.
Vettel to Ferrari was also good. I'm going to throw in a Narain Karthikeyan to HRT in 2011.
You're being facetious now.
Can I have that? Rosanna, you got any?
Well, do you know what? I'm just going to pick up on the Nico Rosberg story because I was filming with him the day before the news broke, and he was doing a piece to camera telling the fans, about what he'd been up to and thanking them for their support over the year. And his first try at the piece to camera was saying, and I can't wait to see you all next year. And he went, actually, Rosanna, do you mind if I do that again? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he did it again, and he didn't mention next year. Now, if I'd been alert to the situation, maybe I'd have guessed. But because it was middle of December, and quite frankly, I was wrung out after a very busy season, travelling around the place, I didn't pick up on it. So he was savvy. He knew what he was doing. So he made me sort of get it all wrong. I should have picked up on that and been a better journalist.
I'll tell you who would have been all over that.
Andrew Benson,
yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, what could have been? Have you got any more?
No, Damon Hill to Footwork. Are we talking about his move in 1989 to Footwork Formula in Formula 3000? Because he never drove for Footwork in Formula 1.
Andrew said he drove for the team that used to be called Footwork after it changed its name to Arrows. So maybe that's where we're going with here.
He did drive for Footwork in F3000.
And that's now we are going niche. Hashtag BBC F1. No matter what year, no matter what era, the driver moves that have got you the most excited. We had another one come in. From Steg. What about Nigel Mansell going back to Williams in 91? He left under a cloud, came back and started heading towards his only world championship, or his 93 move to IndyCar. That was a surprise.
Has anyone said Michael Schumacher coming back to the grid for Mercedes?
Not yet. Not yet.
Come on, that's huge. 7-time world champ.
Yeah.
At that point, the standalone greatest driver returns from a hiatus of a few years. Huge.
Daniel Ricciardo to AlphaTauri 2023. Keep them coming. Hashtag BBC F1. Last one for now. Daniel. Carlos Sainz to Renault was pretty eye-catching, but it came at an expense to somebody. But
who's that? Daniel?
That was Daniel.
Get out of town.
Yeah. Get out of town. Know your room. Know your audience, Daniel. 36 minutes and 35. 34 seconds remain of free practice one. Verstappen is currently fastest ahead of Leclerc. Perez, Alonso, Sainz the top 5. Norris, Hamilton, Piastri, Russell, Gasly the top 10. Ocon, Drugovich, Tsunoda, Lawson, Hulkenberg, Magnussen the top 16, all who have set a time, and still no time for Logan Sargent, Alex Albon, Zhou Guanyu or Valtteri Bottas. So the two Williams and the two Alfa Romeos, but Zhou is on an outlap.
And Sargent is on a flying lap, finally. Albon's about to start a flying lap as well. Soft tyres on both the Williams, and Sargent's just a couple of tenths down on Max Verstappen, skirting around the gravel on the exit of the second chicane, and he's into the Lesmos already. So Williams biding their time, 25 minutes into the session, and they will get a first foray onto the circuit on a weekend and a track that they think will suit them. Whether that will mean it does suit them, we don't know with Williams at the moment, because they seem to be sometimes good, sometimes bad, and they don't know why. last week was so good for the team generally, and they thought it would be a miserable one. Alex Albon almost qualifying in the top 3. Logan Sargent got his first time qualifying in the top 10. What will they do here? Sargent's got a big weekend on his hands, I think, here.
Yeah, do you think this is one of the last races until Abu Dhabi, the finale, that he would have had previous experience of in Formula 2 with a car that can clearly perform off the back of, even with the crashes, one of his best weekends in terms of pace, as he crosses the line to go 17th on his first proper lap, 125.6 on that soft compounder tyre. For Sargent, do you think James Vowles, the team principal, Williams are going to sort of grit their teeth and bear with him for the end of the year as long as they can see those incremental gains? Or would they rather, bring in a Mick Schumacher or a Felipe Drugovich or somebody else from F2, a Frederick Vesti, who's currently up there in the F2 Championship and is backed by Mercedes, who are all chomping at the bit? And if Sargent is not quite on par with Albon and also crashing, Williams can't really have that in their team.
Well, he'll obviously stay for this year. So the question is
for next year.
The question is for next year, and he's under pressure. He's a rookie. It's a difficult time for rookies at the moment, and they don't get a lot of running pre-season. It's tricky to gain during the season with limited running. Fernando Alonso has just come through the exit of Ascari and run over a little bit of carbon fibre. I didn't see which car that flicked up off the exit curb. But not huge excitement overall there for Alonso, who's in 4th place and is back in the pits as well. So Sargent, he's got to start delivering, even though it's tricky for rookies, because Albon's just done so well. And this is a team now, Williams, that for the last few years, getting a point in a Williams would be heroics, but now they're genuine midfielders. And Albon on his first fly is up into 10th place, 1.2 seconds down on Verstappen. And if they had Albon times 2, they'd be a real force in that midfield. So that's what they'll be looking at. And they would have known when they signed Sargent that they were playing a little bit of the long game. But they've got to see, I think, more potential from him, because it's fairly one-way traffic towards Albon. And I don't see Logan actually closing the gap at all. And that's the difficult bit, I think, for Sargent. The gap's not coming down. Even if he qualified in the top 10 in Zandvoort, Albon was 4th. He was 6/10 down on Albon in Q2. So the standout result was better, but that's because the car's getting better rather than Sargent's matching up.
Do you think, though, when you look at Albon and someone like Gasly, who both got promoted prematurely in their career perhaps and were outpaced and then ultimately lost their seats, but were given second chances and have ultimately now proven that, well, yes, they are good drivers, and Albon particularly right now, and obviously Gasly fresh off the back of a podium in Zandvoort, and of course he won round here in an AlphaTauri a couple of years ago. I think, doesn't it highlight a little bit how you do need to give drivers a couple of seasons? Franz Tost's old story of give a rookie 3 seasons to shine.
I'm getting way too much helmet lift. Understood, thank you.
So a bit of buffeting for Verstappen, long straights, and you can just get air getting underneath the helmet. It wants to rip it off your head sometimes. So that's pretty unpleasant for Max. It's not stopping him being at the top of the time, still 2/10 clear of Perez, who improved on the last lap. He's 3/10 clear of the next best car, which is Charles Leclerc, who is in the pits. I disagree with you on Gasly and Albon. The problem for Gasly and Albon was the second promotion to Red Bull, but they earned that by being a great rookie. Gasly, he had his first full season in Formula 1 was 2018. His second race was in Bahrain that year. He finished 4th. That's standout. That's potential for Gasly, and it's that sort of result that got Red Bull thinking this guy can go alongside Max Verstappen and do a good job. And we know what Albon did in his first season as well in AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso. He was very solid, showed the potential in the first half of the season, and got a promotion to Red Bull as well. So they actually came in as rookies and showed what they could do. The difficult move was going from a midfield team to being a front runner.
Something is wrong with the rear end, medium with high speed. There's zero grip. It feels like something is stalling.
That's Valtteri Bottas on the radio to his team at Alfa Romeo. I mean, they have finally got both cars out there after a stuttered start, but clearly not all is well down at Alfa Romeo. Let's head to Rosanna.
Yeah, Alfa Romeo having a tricky start to this Italian Grand Prix weekend. I've had a word with Williams because their drivers Logan Sargent and Alex Albon were late out, but they assure me it's all part of the run plan, and Alex Albon looking pretty good up there in P10, although we'd probably expect more from that team this weekend with their slippery car. And picking up on that little bit of debris out on track that Fernando Alonso ran over, that was off Norris's car. Lando Norris, as I mentioned earlier, running the aero rake on his car. That's come off. Now he's just got Flovis on half his rear wing, but it was his car that the debris came off. And I'm just standing outside the Alpine garage of Pierre Gasly. The team tell me there was nothing wrong with the car, but the engine cover came off. It's now gone back on. Lots of activity. As you can hear, the car now firing up. And I tell you what, Pierre's precision driving needs to be on this weekend. His garage is so narrow that they've had to angle the car so that he can make it out. There are literally centimetres between the wheels and the edges of the garage. If he's anything like me, there may be damage this weekend.
Thanks, Rosanna. Okay, Gasly then currently down in 11th, but in the pits. He's just in front of his teammate Ocon, who's on an outlap. Andrew Benson makes a good point. The problem with the give them a couple of seasons for a rookie argument is that the really, really good ones don't need it. And you could argue if they're not really, really good, why stick with them? And, well, Max Verstappen is probably quite a good case in point for that one.
And who is a driver that's not shown flashes of potential in the first year, but give them a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and then they become brilliant drivers? Name one of those.
I'm thinking, and I can't think quick enough. This is Hamilton.
It's tough to... Okay, here comes Hamilton on the hard tyre. You ever think about that?
Let me think.
Hamilton right up to the gravel, exited the Rogier chicane on the hard tyres. Verstappen still top of the times, 14 laps for him, so he's been out and circulated a couple more times, and the benchmark remains at 1 minute 22.6. 2 tenths clear of Perez, who's nudged his best time down again. Still thinking?
I don't think I think you're right. I think that's the case in point, that most drivers who come in and show those good flashes of potential in Formula One, as Lewis Hamilton gets a nice little toe there from the Aston Martin down the back straight towards the Parabolica / Alboreto curve, they do, I think Kevin Magnussen on the podium in his first race for McLaren showed the flash of potential, but actually then he got biffed for Fernando Alonso, but he came back again, obviously, and is still in Formula One, but hasn't actually had a high of that ever since. So I think it's too complicated a question. Here's Perez.
Let's say a toe. We haven't had a toe.
Yeah. Something else that we're going to see a little bit more of this weekend. It's going to be a big feature, I think, by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon's qualifying. Slipstreaming, and Perez saying, let's try a bit of towing. And I don't know who that's going to be with right now, because his teammate's still in the garage. And Perez is out there running around in second place. He's going to try and pick something up from someone else, it seems, and that will give you a fair amount of speed on the straights. You're going to live with a little bit less downforce through the corners, but overall around this circuit, so straight line sensitive, so much time can be gained on those straights that having a slipstream can be crucial. It's a pretty straightforward question, I think.
Well, it is. Because the point is, there isn't, but I was trying to find one.
Yeah. So the classic example has got to be Yuki Tsunoda, who has been average, I would say, for the last couple of seasons. He's been okay. There's been, unlike probably you say with Sargent so far this year, there's been flashes of performance in his rookie season. I think he got a point on his debut.
Yuki?
Yuki.
Yeah, 2 points.
2 points on his debut. So he showed some flashes, but it took a while, and there was a time, especially in his first half a year, where it looked like his seat might be in doubt, and that's fairly commonplace for rookie drivers who it's difficult to jump in and do the Kevin Magnussen podium on debut. Fast forward a couple of years, we're now in Tsunoda's 3rd year. He's got a new teammate, Gasly's left, and he destroyed Nick De Vries. De Vries is out of Formula One again because Tsunoda did such a good job, and then was toe-to-toe with Ricciardo for a couple of races. Now he has another teammate, and overall it's quite difficult to gauge. But I would say Tsunoda is one of those classic Red Bull young drivers, has been given the luxury of time that so many others don't get, and he's kind of establishing himself now as a solid F1 driver. And until he has a big benchmark again, it's difficult to know if this year Tsunoda has become a more accomplished driver, or if you put Pierre Gasly back alongside him, if he'd still be trailing by a couple of tenths. That's the difficulty with it. But surely there's not been a top-line driver who's ever come in and looked pretty average
yeah.
for 2 seasons.
Tsunoda did get 4th in Abu Dhabi in his rookie year.
I said there was flashes.
I'm botting on like crazy, guys. Like crazy. I don't know.
Zhou Guanyu and Alfa Romeo's woes continue, this time in terms of bottoming. Hashtag BBC F1 Bethany says, if we're talking about drivers coming into F1, I'd say Red Bull Toro Rosso hiring a driver that hadn't won a racing championship in the junior levels, or the direct below junior levels, was pretty surprising. How'd that work out? Well, he's now a 2-time champion, so that is going pretty well.
That was quite an exciting move, wasn't it? 2015, 2014, Red Bull announced he's going to Toro Rosso. And then 17-year-old Max Verstappen comes in with 1 year of car racing under his belt. I give it that was a midfield bit of excitement.
I think we're going to fix this issue. The car is undrivable. The rear end in high speed is something stalling.
And Valtteri Bottas, they're not happy. Stalling issues, rear end not okay for the Alfa Romeo driver, who's been on the podium a couple of times here in Monza over the years.
They're having a really nightmare start. Still 19th and 20th. Bottas and Zhou back in the pits, having had a very, very late start to the session. And I wonder if that's linked to Zhou's radio message of saying the car's bottoming horribly, and that's creating this stalling and instability that Bottas is talking about as well. So they're down on mileage, they're down on performance. There was some reliability question as well for them earlier on. And I wonder if they're just simply running the car too low. They need to pick it up, and that would stop the stalling of these ground effect cars. Kind of like a porpoising phenomenon potentially there.
On the same vein of Toro Rosso signing Max Verstappen, then of course Max Verstappen replacing Kvyat for the Spanish Grand Prix. That was pretty exciting at the time, and that was a big hitter move. That's not just a midfield move, and that's a classic case of Red Bull doing a driver stop and it paying off, and then some. Of course, went on to take his first Grand Prix win.
Well, that's the fun of the top teams making a change. You get new Grand Prix winners. Had Verstappen not driven for Red Bull in that race, he might have done a brilliant race, but he's not going to win the Grand Prix. And it's always nice to have new winners in Formula 1.
That was Ashir, so thank you very much for that, Ashir. Hashtag BBC F1. Keep them coming, and we'll try and get through a few more. 23 minutes and 8.76 seconds remain of this first free practice one session here in Monza at the Temple of Speed.
Did anyone go for Vettel to Ferrari?
I think we did have a Vettel to Ferrari, yeah. We've had a few good ones from back in the day. Kieran has just sent through this. Lotus weren't keen on Mansell to begin with, and Williams saw him as a number 2 for a while, so that manoeuvre there, I think that was off the back of somebody saying about Mansell and his move. Hashtag BBC F1 if you've got any more off the tip of your tongue. A lot of smoke flying out the back of one of the Ferraris as it trundles down the pit lane. It's Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, and coming out of the exhaust, a little bit of smoke, but he carries on and heads out of the pit lane. This is the sound of Alex Albon through Ascari and losing control of his Williams and skirting through the gravel on the exit on the right-hand side, and he just about manages to keep it pointing in a straight direction.
Snappy and sketchy for Albon. Really high-speed section of track coming through. So he's gone through the left-hander of Ascari. Then you're trying to keep it pinned or as close to pinned through the right and the left again. That was soft tyres for Albon, and the car already was getting loose on him coming through the right. Kept it in through the left and used all that gravel on the outside of there. Managed to keep it straight through there so he didn't lose the car completely, and did a bit of rally crossing at high speed, but very sketchy. It's been a pretty clean session apart from that, but that's our first big moment. Albon, who's nudged himself to ninth now, 7 tenths away from Verstappen's pace, and he's come back into the pits after that one. Was improving on that lap until then.
Yeah, who everybody is in out there, bar Sainz, Perez, Tsunoda, Albon, Piastri, Gasly, and the 2 Alfa Romeos who've been having trouble since, the lights went green, really. Verstappen is fastest from Sainz, Perez, Leclerc, and Alonso at the top 5. Fernando saying he's willing to take more risks to try and get Aston Martin's first win in Formula 1. I think he can feel it on the tip of his tongue, but it's going to take something. If it didn't happen last weekend with the huge changeable conditions, with Verstappen actually not making the right call initially to come in on the Inters at the end of lap 1 like his teammate Sergio Perez. If it didn't happen then, because Verstappen ultimately still won, it's going to take something out of this world to try and find a different winner to Max Verstappen by the end of this year.
There will be another chance, I'm sure. I mean, Zandvoort in the end wasn't even a chance, was it? It should have been, with everything that happened. Verstappen's out there on slicks with spray coming up at the end of lap 1. He's managing to continue unscathed, as remarkably everyone did at that part of the Grand Prix. It was incredible driving skill from everyone to keep it pointing the right way on slicks in what was very wet conditions in the end. You ride through that with Verstappen, which he also did in Monaco, which was probably anyone's best chance of beating him, and maybe Aston Martin will be ruining that at the end of the year if they don't get a race win, that they had a strategy chance there and didn't claim it. But that was another one. Slicks in the pouring rain around Monaco. And the thing is with Max, you chuck any of these things at him, a red flag with 6 laps to go, and an intermediate start with Fernando Alonso just behind, who's been on fire in the mixed conditions of Zandvoort. You think that's a chance. One little mistake and he'll lose the race, but he's just delivering everything. He's making so few mistakes from the cockpit. Those mistakes that he does make, it's a lock-up, or it's a nothing. It's a 1 or 2 tenths thing rather than a dropping of a position, like his teammate did at the end of Zandvoort as well, in the mixed conditions, or the very wet conditions on the Inters. He's just nailing everything, and it's sublime, the skill level that we are witnessing in 2023 with Verstappen. So you do turn up to Monza on a dry weekend forecast, no rain, a Red Bull track in theory. Verstappen is top of the times. There's actually Sainz now who's got himself within half a tenth, so the Ferrari's getting closer. But you wonder, how on earth, if you can't beat him in Zandvoort, how is someone going to beat him in Monza? But you never know.
The thing with Verstappen, or the thing actually that interested me about the Hamilton contract, is that it's up until the end of 2025. The next sort of big regulation change for the power units, when we've got engine manufacturers and a change up in the pecking order perhaps, is 2026. I'm surprised that Hamilton sort of cut it short there, but also, is that how long do you think? I don't want to get all doom and gloom, but can anyone rein in Verstappen over the next couple of seasons? Of course, in any kind of regulation set, things do start to close up as the seasons go by, but Verstappen just seems to have an advantage and then some, that he can almost defend from anything.
Well, yeah, and that's been spoken about by a few drivers this year, including Hamilton, who's been quite vocal, saying, well, actually the problem is here, we're into a stable set of regulations until 2026, when there is a power unit change and a big car regulation change overhaul. So that will change the picture. But until then, everyone's catching Red Bull through the year. It's very actually difficult to see it because they're doing so well, Red Bull out front. But generally, you close up through the year. And we saw it more obviously with Mercedes last year, when they were nowhere, struggling with plenty of issues, not least porpoising at the start of the year. And then they went on to win in Brazil with George Russell. So that really shows through the year how teams can close the gap if they get it right. The problem is now you get to September, and Red Bull, they're switched off for this year. The race team will still carry on and try and win every race that they can. Verstappen will break records and do what he can this year with the beast they've created. But the design team, they're already well into next year's car, whereas the design teams for the likes of McLaren moving forward well this year. They've been amazing developers through the season. Aston Martin developed well over the winter, came back with the new upgrades in Zandvoort, and they worked, and they're still bringing lots of parts to the car for this year. They're not going to be as focused on next year because they still need to play out as much as they can for this year. So they will have a design team on next year's car already, but they might not have as 100% focus on it as Red Bull can have, and they have the luxury to have because they've won both titles theoretically already.
Yeah, well, here in Monza, Red Bull looking for a 15th consecutive race win. That would surpass the record currently held by Ferrari, and Verstappen then looking to make a new record and going for his 10th consecutive Formula One race win, and 12th in 2023. So currently with a 1:22.657. He is fastest ahead of Sainz, Perez, Leclerc and Russell. The top 5 split by about half a second. Then comes Alonso, Norris, Hamilton, Tsunoda and Albon, the top 10. This is the sound of Tsunoda and his team radio.
Hamilton don't know how to move away.
Copy.
So not too happy with Lewis Hamilton there as old Yuki as he's travelling along the straight towards the Ascari chicane. But Hamilton looked to be on the left-hand side of the straight and out of the way of the racing line. So I think Tsunoda just getting a little bit distracted there as Alonso runs out wide and kicks up a little bit of the gravel off his tyres.
Remarkably few impeding traffic radio messages so far. That's the first one that we've heard, I think. 45 minutes into the session from Tsunoda. And it's an easier circuit, this one, than we've had recently for getting out of the way. Because of those long straights, you have a nice eye line to see cars coming up behind you before the parabolic of the final corner. So it should be much easier for traffic management until we get into the chaos of slipstreaming probably tomorrow. But Tsunoda there, the first disgruntled driver with Hamilton just ahead.
Well, we've had some pretty punchy qualifyings over the years, haven't we? I think, what was it, a few years ago where only 3 of them made it over the line with 1 lap to go because the rest of them were all in Q3 trying to figure out where they were going to place themselves coming down the back straight and to find the best possible gap and also get the benefit of a tow, because the long straights here, if you can get a tow, you can get a couple of extra kph down the back straight or the main straight, can really go a very long way. As this is the sound of Carlos Sainz in his Ferrari coming around the final corner across the line on the hard compound of the tyre. He's currently second fastest and on a bit of a long run there, I think. Felipe Drugovich stepping in for Lance Stroll in this FP1 session, his first FP1 of the year with Aston Martin. He nearly got the race drive in Bahrain in place of Lance Stroll, who had the broken wrists, but Stroll doing an amazing job of recovering and getting in the car in time. So Drugovich did take part in pre-season testing. But Jolly, can you take us back to your first FP1 outing? What were you feeling? What was going through your brain? Are you quite nervous, just not wanting to bin the car in your first chance at it?
Yeah, I was pretty nervous, and then I think I spun within 2 laps as well, which didn't help.
Wait, what track was it on?
It was in China, and I'd never driven it before. And yeah, it was very bumpy coming through turn 8, the right-hander. And the car just suddenly let go. So I did the first part of it on flat-spotted tyres, and then waited for a new set for the end of the session. FP1's when you're an FP1 driver, so that is simply Drugovich today. It was Robert Schwartzman last time out in Zandvoort. Still, the teams need to give up a couple of FP1s in the season, and they've been hesitant to do it so far. We'll see it more going towards the end of the season. But it's a real trial time for the drivers that jump in, and Drugovich, it's a mini qualifying for him, really. He might be, I'm sure he won't be on a qualifying run plan at all. He's done medium tyres so far. He's 9/10 away from Alonso. Alonso's 6th, Drugovich is 17th. So there's quite the gulf between the two, but it's an advert for Drugovich. He's there as a reserve driver for Aston Martin. He's actually been linked to Sargent's Williams seat in the last couple of weeks as well.
And the Alpha, I'm hearing as well, because Zhou's seat apparently is not safe.
Yeah. So he's been linked around, and he's the Formula 2 champion from last year. He's a good peddler, Felipe Drugovich, and nearly got a run out at the season opener this year when Lance Stroll was away with damaged wrist. But yeah, he's done 18 laps, and you've just got to show in each of them, don't bin the car, number one, keep it on the straight and narrow, give some good feedback to the team. But if you can show a flash of pace, then it really helps. So there's pressure on these guys. Drugovich he's done this before. He knows what it's like. But yeah, I remember my one. It's quite a nerve-wracking time going out there on your weekend, because it's your big hour. And for the rest of the drivers, this is the most run-of-the-mill session. Into the long runs now. Gasly crosses the line, 1:27, so we're 5 seconds away from the pace. The race drivers are dialing in for the long haul, and you're thinking, this is my last 11 minutes now to try and show what I can do.
Yeah, Drugovich currently in the pits. Here's Bottas, who's been struggling.
Can you confirm the car is better now? Question. Yes, better.
So they've tweaked something then on that Alfa Romeo. So Valtteri Bottas then speaking to his engineer, Alex Chan, and sounding a little bit happier. Rosanna.
Yeah, I just want to talk about Felipe Drugovich a little bit more. It's interesting, isn't it? It's not just about the performance on track. Of course, you've got to be speedy, show your talent to the team, but you've also got to be able to slot in with the other personnel. And Felipe's been working with Lance's usual race engineer, Ben Mitchell, working with him, sort of building on the experience they have from working together from the Bahrain test. And Jolyon, you'll attest to this. It's not just the on-track action that Felipe will be doing this weekend. He'll be doing all the usual duties that an F1 driver would do, engineering meetings and media sessions with the likes of me. So it's a busy one. It's not just get in the car and perform. There's a lot that goes into being an F1 driver, and that's what all these sessions are about. It's preparing these younger drivers so that when an opportunity arises, they're ready to jump in, as Liam Lawson was last weekend, who I think is doing not a bad job this morning in the AlphaTauri. Very different conditions to this time last week, of course. He wasn't even in the car this time last week. He had to wait till FP3. But it's all about building their confidence and getting them used to working with the team and the environment.
And to chatting to you, Rosanna, after the session.
That's the worst part of the job, I've heard.
Oh, you need to be braced for that. You need a good while of practice.
Yeah, I ask all the killer questions, that's me.
Talk
Lawson.
to Rosanna. That's written into your FP1 contract these days, isn't it?
What did you say? What's written into my contract?
But the drivers have to talk to you after their FP1 session if it's their debut. It's written into the contracts. Oh, there we go.
Rosanna's checking the small print now.
Yeah, she is. She's worried. Less than 10 minutes to go, and Bottas has just come across the line and starting to improve his lap times, just gone 15th.
So Lawson is half a second down on Tsunoda in his first fully-fledged FP1. He will be in for the weekend. He's done FP1s before, a la Drugovich. And that will have helped him, as Rosanna said, just jumping in. And even if you do a test day, there's only 10 cars out. The team's never run a full test day with both cars. So it's different when you're into a run plan and there's 20 cars out there. You've got to find the space and run through the program. But half a second down on Yuki Tsunoda. Tsunoda 9th, Lawson 13th. And then for Lawson, he'll then crack on this weekend and focus on trying to improve. And that's the thing when you're a rookie and you're stepping in. He didn't really experience that last time in Zandvoort. He jumped in and it was all so thrust into the action. There was no time to try and work on the car, work on your driving through the weekend, make incremental changes. It was just bam, there you go, do your best. This time he could be a bit more methodical about it, but you have got to always stay on top of things. Keep working on your driving. Looking at Tsunoda, they'll have all the data of what Yuki's doing at the wheel, and he'll have to just try and learn and pick up what he can. And also keep fine-tuning the setup. And compared to Formula 2 cars, there's so much more devil in the setup detail in these Formula 1 cars, half of which is at your fingertips as well now, with so many settings that you can change other than just the brake bias in Formula 2, your differential settings, your brake mapping. It's very complicated, life in Formula 1, even as you're going behind the wheel to maximise your machinery, and that's what Lawson's going to figure out.
Hashtag BBC F1, drivers who didn't perform in their first couple of seasons but went on to become greats. We've had a few.
Okay, I'm all ears for this.
Phil has said and has offered up Jenson Button. Now, I have had a gander already at his set of results, and they're not. His first year wasn't actually terrible, but of course that was, 2000? So there's a couple of fifths and a couple of fourths in there, which on paper is pretty good. But I wonder back then, obviously, we had the different points allocation and also more reliability issues.
It was only points down to 6th when Button started in 2000, and he got a point on his second race in Brazil. He got a couple more in his fourth race. So I would say there was immediately some flashes for Jenson Button, but I think that's an honourable shout for a driver that was sort of peaking towards the latter half of their career, probably, even if there was potential with the BAR days.
That was from Phil. Okay, how about this for another one? This is from Dr. F, hashtag BBC F1. What about Jean-Eric Verne, as a driver who had solid, if an unspectacular couple of years in Formula 1, was quicker than Ricciardo at times and has now gone on to be a two-time Formula E champion?
Huh?
No? Not having that? None of that?
No, we're not having that.
No? Worth a shot. I mean, he did all right in Formula 1.
What?
And he was quicker than Ricciardo. You already beat him in the driver's
Look,
standings.
I want to find someone that's not shone in Formula One and then for a couple of years and then shone in Formula One. And there's so many. Look at Lucas Di Grassi, who came into Formula One and was mediocre with Virgin. That must have been in.
Well, he could only do so much in
2010.
Virgin in 2010, yeah.
Yeah, but he got obliterated by Timo Glock, his teammate. He got obliterated, and then he became a Formula E legend. There's a difference in calibre between a Formula E champion and a Formula One champion. So I want to know someone that
offered a Formula E seat or anything when you hang up your helmet, your F1 helmet.
I was actually.
Were you?
I was.
Is this the exclusive? Have you said this before?
But it
on
didn't
air?
happen. No, I haven't. There you go.
Got there. There we go. Come on, give us a hint. Can you tell us who it's for? Or was
Nope, my lips are sealed. But then
Damn.
the BBC came calling, and how could I give up
and
a,
it's
a
always an
radio
offer
mic?
you cannot refuse. Good. Jenson Button is probably is a decent shout there. So keep them coming. Nick has said Button's first season is pretty wildly regarded as good. It's his second season that was a concerning one. So what, 2001 with Benetton? Yeah, only 1 point score in that whole year. 5th place in Germany for Button then. But of course, going on to have a career up until, well, his one-off outing in Monaco 2017, and of course the championship winning run in 2009.
Yeah, that 2001 season for Button was the one that was the damaging one. The rookie Jenson Button was fairly strong, but the Benetton also wasn't great. Dizzy Keller was his teammate, managed to snaffle a podium. Button's a decent shout for a driver that had the luxury of a bit of time to re-establish and come back. But I would say there was always promise with Jenson Button.
Andrew Benson has just he's giving us a few WhatsApp updates and he's not having Jev either. Roxy hashtag BBC One. You mean we missed out on a team Sam Bird and team Jolyon Palmer in Formula E? Gutted. What an all-star lineup. But instead, it's 5 Live. They get the spoils. 4 minutes, just over that remaining of free practice 1, and the Tifosi are out in force as Charles Leclerc comes screaming past the grandstands through Ascari, and well, I know it's FP1 and everyone has been running different tyres, different strategies, but Sainz in second, Leclerc in 4th. That's going to do them no harm, starting FP1, and for the fans at least, up there.
Perfectly solid for Ferrari. Red Bull, Ferrari, the top 4. They've managed to split the two then. Perez is just under a couple of tenths down on Verstappen. The times are all close. All of those guys did their best on the hard tyre as well. And I think Ferrari will be quite content. And I think I'm expecting them to be fighting with, or to be maybe best of the rest behind Red Bull. It's a low downforce circuit, should suit them a little bit more. We saw in Spa, Leclerc had pole position with Verstappen's penalty, so high downforce circuits like Zandvoort really don't suit them at the moment, but the lower downforce should be a little bit better, and they've definitely started the weekend well. They usually are pretty strong at Monza. They usually find a little bit of something extra.
Well, what do you make of the McLarens at the moment? Because, I mean, they had a pretty decent... Well, they were great up until the race, I think, really, in Zandvoort. I mean, they had good pace. Piastri fell away a little bit in qualifying compared to his teammate Norris. But, you know, they got a Mercedes power unit in the back of that McLaren. Theoretically, that should give them a bit of an advantage here at the moment. Norris 7th, Piastri 11th, plus upgrades that they've been bringing since Austria, and they've got they like many of the other teams have trimmed their front wing and the rear wing, and they've also brought some new stuff to the front and rear corners of that McLaren. So again, on paper, it should also be quite handy for McLaren to be up there as well.
They've had a design ethos to try and reduce the drag on that car, which is where Red Bull have been so strong, getting straight line speed, reducing the drag, and that's the area that McLaren have gone for. Of course, this circuit is a completely different track in terms of that drag downforce relationship anyway, because everyone's on the lowest downforce that they've got to try and reduce the drag. So it'd be interesting to see if that's still a factor for them, even though everyone's on the low downforce configuration. They're half a second off at the moment. Norris in 7th. Times are close, and I think their driver lineup is outstanding as well. We were speaking on the Checker Flag podcast. Andrew Benson said emphatically, Mercedes have the best driver pairing in Formula One, and I think it's difficult to argue across two drivers. I think Max Verstappen is the strongest driver in F1. I think it's difficult to argue against that right now. But Sergio Perez is a fair way adrift, whereas Russell and Hamilton, pretty strong. But I was thinking, you know what? Norris and Piastri, that's a really tidy lineup as well. Norris, I think, is a really standout driver, and he's showing it when he can. But Piastri is keeping him very honest this season.
Just a minute left then of FP1, and thank you to everybody getting in touch on hashtag BBCF1, talking multiple things really, but one of the things that's really spiced things up is drivers in their first year who've shown glimpses of pace and have gone on to achieve great things. Nulla has said no one spoke much about Maldonado. Good old Pastor Maldonado. Didn't really show much in his first year at Williams, but was then in his first year at Williams, and then 2012, obviously a winner. Up there fighting, clearly had pace, but just couldn't quite always keep the car in one piece. And then I think tailed off a bit in Lotus. I don't know. It's another name to throw out there.
Didn't it start out as being drivers that didn't really show much promise in the opening years, and then became
that's what we're going. Yeah, that's what we're going for. Yeah. So
and
Maldonado.
Someone's coming with John-Eric Verne. Someone else coming with Pastor Maldonado. What am I hearing?
Kimi Räikkönen. How did he do in his first year? Back in the Sauber days.
So Kimi was so young. He was the last decade's Max Verstappen, wasn't he? 1 year of Formula Renault and then into the deep end. So there was always, I think, a little bit of potential with Kimi, and there was the rock star factor of jumping in as such a youngster, and he also showed flashes of pace.
Well, we're not having Maldonado then, we're not having John-Eric Verne, but thank you for getting in touch on hashtag BBCF1. Always enlightening, and that has led us to the checkered flag for FP1 as a big lock-up for Max Verstappen coming into turn one, just as he comes across the line and into the braking zone for the Retifilia chicane, but he manages to sling it into the right-hander, then through the left and get on the power and out through Curva Grande. But at the end of FP1 then, it's Verstappen, just less than half a tenth clear of Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Sergio Perez third in front of Leclerc. Russell the top 5. Alonso, Norris, Hamilton, Tsunoda and Albon the top 10. Piastri, Sargent, Lawson, Gasly, Bottas the top 15. Hülkenberg, Ocon, Felipe Drugovich in his FP1 outing in place of Lance Stroll finishes up in the 18th spot ahead of Kevin Magnussen and Zhou Guanyu, 20th and last after a difficult start to the day for both Alfa Romeo drivers.
Thank you very much, Harry and Jolien. Yes, Max Verstappen, fastest of anyone in FP1. More laps than anybody else as well, 30 laps for the Dutchman. Guys, is it looking as ominous as we thought it might coming into this weekend, do you think?
Well, it's difficult to say, isn't it, after an hour in which the top order's split by very little. I think at least Verstappen's not half a second up the road. I'd say it's looking a little bit less ominous than what we might have envisaged.
Yeah, I would agree. And it is Ferrari there or thereabouts, because yesterday, we spoke about it earlier, George Russell was saying it wasn't going to be them troubling Red Bull, and he was thinking it would be Ferrari, and so it has proven true with Carlos Sainz P2 and Charles Leclerc P4. A little bit disappointing for Sergio Perez that he just can't just get it up there to P2 and just start the weekend off on the sort of front foot and in the way that Red Bull want him to.
Well, maybe let's hold off the Perez bashing until maybe qualifying. I think it's only FP1 and he is third, to be fair. And 12 laps for him, 29 laps for him, 30 for Verstappen. I mean, he's there or thereabouts at the moment. But he himself saying into the weekend, I'm not getting up to speed with these upgrades as quickly as I should do. So that is clearly weighing on him. But 10th and a half off Verstappen after FP1, I think you can take that for 1 hour of running.
Okay, we'll save the bashing for a little later on in the weekend. McLaren not up where we perhaps thought they might be, although we know that they were testing some parts and obviously the circuit-specific bits that they've brought to this track. And then also Williams, two teams that we thought might be a little further up the order. Or is it all just going to shake out in FP2 and FP3?
It'll shake out in FP2 and FP3. It's FP1, it's FP1. You never know what's happening. The fuel loads are going to be very different. We saw a lot of aero rakes on the cars as well to start, and that shows that there's development work going on, a lot of setup work to come. And on top of that, a lot of the times are pretty close still. Half a second Norris was off the outright pace, and he's down in 7th place. Even Albon 7 tenths down in the top 10. If just a few tenths difference can make you look suddenly best of the rest, or in the mix of the top 5 if you're a Williams, or tumbling outside of the top 10.
Well, there's also this alternate tyre allocation as well, which is coming in this weekend, second time out. So we could have drivers that are just managing their tyres a little bit more throughout the weekend because they are mandated to use certain compounds throughout qualifying on Saturday.
And can I just say on that, we had a fair amount of running in the end.
I was going to say the same, Julian. Absolutely. I was expecting it to be really quiet in the pit lane, but everyone was out and about. I know the Williams went out later, all part of their run plan, they assure me. But, you know, the fans in the grandstand got some nice action this last hour.
31 laps for Max Verstappen, 30 for Sergio Perez. One of the big negative of this tyre allocation for the weekend was that the fans on the Fridays won't see too much, but there was plenty of it. I don't think there was ever a moment where the track fell totally silent in that.
Yeah, no, I think plenty to look forward to when it comes to FP2 as well later on. So we think Max Verstappen is the one to beat, though, very shortly.
I would say so, Rosanna. If anybody can beat him, I mean, the Tifosi can back Sainz and Leclerc all they want, and let's just hope that there's a good fight between the Red Bulls and Ferraris. That's all we can hope for.
Well, there we go. Maybe the Tifosi will be that extra gear that Ferrari need this weekend. That is FP1 done and dusted. We will be back live at 5 to 4 for FP2. You can listen to us on BBC 5 Sports Extra and the BBC Sounds app. My thanks to Jolyon Palmer and Harry Benjamin and Andrew Benson supplying a lovely stream of messages. We'll be back later on. Goodbye.